Hello, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on your location today. Welcome to our regional dialogue. We will get started. Okay, thank you all again for joining. I'm Haejin Park, Partnership Specialist from UNDP Seoul Policy Centre, and I will be moderating the 2 hours dedicated to today's dialogue on building inclusive digital economies through innovation and public-private partnerships. We received over 150 pre-registrations as of this morning from around 20 countries in the Asia Pacific, plus 30 countries in other regions, including colleagues from UNDP and other parts of the UN, government and private sector representatives, as well as members of civil society, think tanks, and academia. I think this attests to the level of interest in the topic we are about to discuss, as well as the fact that today's event was powered by a number of partners, including UNESCAP, WFUNA, Citi Foundation, which co-leads with UNDP Seoul Policy Centre on the Youth Collab program, as well as the Asia Foundation and Impact Collective by TheVentures. For UNDP Seoul Policy Centre, this event also doubles as a stepping stone to launch a new so-called SDG partnership program that will aim to support countries in need of driving the inclusive digital economy agenda by providing advisory and seed funding support based on Korean and international expertise in this field. It is great to see our participants signing in as I speak. Throughout the session, I invite you all to submit any questions via the chat box. We also collected some questions during event pre-registration. So we will have a Q&A session toward the end where we will address some of the most frequently asked questions the best we can during our time window. So without further ado, let me play a video message from Dr. Ann Eupner, Acting Director of the UNDP Seoul Policy Centre.
It is my great pleasure to welcome all of our partners, speakers, and guests from Korea and around the world to today's regional policy dialogue on building inclusive digital economies through innovation and public-private partnerships. As the UN's leading development agency that helps countries achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, UNDP places great importance on building inclusive, equitable, ethical, and sustainable digital societies and boosting the digital capacity of vulnerable and marginalized groups. One of the greatest obstacles to achieving this goal is the so-called digital divide. Digital tools and technologies increasingly impact all aspects of our daily lives, including communication, education, healthcare, commerce, and finance. As these vital services shift online with great stride, particularly in these COVID times, those who are excluded from the winds of digital change face the risk of being left further behind, exacerbating global socio-economic inequalities. Closing the digital gap requires empowering and upskilling the most vulnerable, including key economic actors such as micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and youth and women-led entrepreneurs to ensure their digital readiness and to leverage the benefits of evolving technologies for employment and livelihoods. This requires concerted efforts across all sectors, including government agencies, policymakers, the private sector, and academia, which in turn calls for strengthened dialogue for multi-sectoral and transnational sharing of opportunities, challenges, and lessons learned. Today's dialogue constitutes an important knowledge exchange component of UNDP's Youth Collab program, which is an initiative co-created by UNDP and Citi Foundation to empower entrepreneurs with the potential to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs through social innovation. Together with UNESCAP and other partners of Youth Collab, we hope that today's dialogue will serve as a platform for knowledge exchange and collective learning that helps us compare notes on building a digital economy that works for all from diverse contexts and viewpoints. I look forward to fruitful discussions and exchange of ideas. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We will now move on to the first session with our first three speakers who will showcase examples of digital inclusion policies and initiatives being implemented in different country contexts within the Asia-Pacific region, including the Republic of Korea and Bangladesh. Our first presenter is Mr. Seongjun Min, team lead of the Digital Inclusion Planning Team of the National Information Society Agency in Korea. Korea has taken up digital inclusion as a key strategic priority for digital transformation, and NIA is one of the key implementing arms of this strategy. Mr. Min, you may begin and screen share your slides, please.
네, 안녕하십니까. 방금 소개받은
Good afternoon. As introduced, I'm Min Seongjun from NIA. First of all, I'd like to thank UNDP and UNESCAP for this invitation. I also like to thank all other participants for their participation in this meeting. My agency, the National Information Society Agency, is an agency responsible for digital transformation across Korea. As a national entity, my agency is working on intelligent network infrastructure, accelerating transition to AI-powered transformation, and incorporating AI into a data network. So my agency is doing all the planning and implementation of these activities. And I'm responsible for digital inclusion as a team lead of digital inclusion planning team. Allow me to start my presentation. As you can see from the presentation, my topic is implementation plan for digital inclusion. This is the table of contents, including background, status and environmental changes, policy direction, vision, and progress and outcome. As you're well aware, the fourth industrial evolution accelerates the spread of digital technology. It has created positive impacts as well as negative impacts. AI, big data, and intelligent information can drive the creation of new technologies, and AI technology can help improve living standards as part of positives. On the front of negatives, rapid acceleration of digital technology can leave some people behind. That can create digital inequality and discrimination. Discrimination and inequality can exacerbate as technology advances. And as a result, this can lead to various conflicts across our society. And everything is going digital in this era of digital norms. And against this backdrop, those who are not familiar with digital technology can experience inconvenience, and as well as feeling left behind and having their livelihoods undermined. The restrictions on offline activities because of the COVID have shown the power of digital technology. The current government is pursuing digital transformation policy, and at the same time, the government is focused on reducing a digital divide to promote inclusive growth, whereby we pursue an inclusive digital economy. Just like two wheels of a car, we need to pursue both digital transformation and digital inclusion in a way that is balanced. Korea ranks #1 in terms of internet broadband, and it ranks among the top in other digital technology indicators. When it comes to internet access of the vulnerable, the ratio is around 72.7% versus 100% of the general public. As digital technology is incorporated into other industries, there's concern about job creation, incorporating digital technology. We need to use digital technology to address social ills and contribute to enhancing living standards. So there's a growing demand for human-centered digital technology development. And against this backdrop, in 2020, in June of 2020, the government came up with a digital inclusion policy that is 3 years. It targets all citizens. It aims to motivate all citizens to participate in digital technology to benefit from such technologies. Instead of pursuing a top-down approach, it invites civil society, businesses, and the government to pursue digital inclusion. The slide shows the plan of digital inclusion announced in June 2020. It has a vision of making a digitally inclusive nation for all with 4 tasks. The first task is making sure that all people have comprehensive digital capabilities. The second task is helping vulnerable groups to easily use digital technologies and services. The third task is promoting the wide use of inclusive digital technologies and support vulnerable groups' social engagement and employment. The fourth task is building PPP and promote community problem solving. And as for the first task, there are 1,000 digital learning centers across our nation where people can learn about digital technology in a manner that is easy. And after the publication of the plan, we are collaborating with local governments to use community centers and community libraries and other SOC facilities to operate 1,000 such centers across our nation. We have developed a digital capability level based upon which we can provide a custom-tailored education. And we are working hard to equip the public with software and AI capabilities and working on side effects of digital technologies such as cyberbullying. And as for the second task, we are spreading Wi-Fi networks and high-speed internet access in rural areas. To improve internet accessibility of the elderly and the disabled, we are providing internet subsidies so that everyone can enjoy digital technology and internet connections. We are improving related institutional standards to improve the accessibility of kiosks. And we are developing accessibility guaranteed kiosks. Businesses and institutions that have room for improvement in accessibility are encouraged to address those shortcomings. And the third task is promoting the wide use of inclusive digital technologies and supporting vulnerable groups' social engagement. And we are developing services to use intelligent services to address the life challenges of the vulnerable. We are developing indoor navigations for the disabled, and we are providing custom-tailored care services using AI. We are also supporting digital-based social enterprises, and we are using crowdsourcing to develop voice and sign language data technology. We're also using these technologies to further develop training programs. And as for the fourth task, we are promoting public-private partnership in order to establish a legal basis. We are working to pass a Digital Inclusion Act. Let me talk about one of the key programs that have been in operation since the announcement of the plan in 2020. The slide shows the operation of digital competency centers. And as I said earlier, there are 1,000 such centers across our nation where we can provide basic digital skills training and training on practical use of digital technology in daily lives. The newly launched government has incorporated this into national priorities. So it is in operation as a key priority project in digital. So we don't have to build digital competency centers. We can utilize idle centers for a digital competency center. We also provide digital experience halls together with digital competency centers where people can experience various digital technologies in the form of tablets, kiosks, and other formats. These centers were pursued in September 2020, and for the next 1.5 years, it has provided education to around 1 million people, including vulnerable groups such as the disabled, children, and senior citizens. And as a result, digital capabilities of the participants improved by 28.8%. And we are creating jobs, 4,000 jobs for instructors and supporters each year. Such operation has led to creating 4,000 jobs in the private sector together with the operation of digital competency centers. So these are some of the pictures of training offered at a digital competency center. The slide shows digital capability assessment tool to provide tailored training. And we are developing our content to provide a tailored training. Over the past 2 years, we have developed 70 training contents. All local governments are participating in the operation of digital competency centers, and 20 private sector training institutions, public sector organizations are participating and collaborating with each other for the operation of digital competency center. We are collaborating with institutions dedicated to social enterprises and MSMEs to provide training on digital marketing, digital transaction, and digital payment, and creating digital environments. And in terms of creating a digital inclusive environment, we are creating a standard for accessibility to kiosk and digital technology. We are conducting a survey in order to assess the level of accessibility to such devices. And as of 2021, we have distributed 4,000 assistive devices for the disabled to improve their accessibility to digital technology. We offered text-to-video conversion guidance and AI services for those with development challenges. Last but not least, in order to create a digital inclusion foundation, we instituted a Digital Inclusion Act, which is at the National Assembly. Before closing, allow me to speak about the Digital Inclusion Act soon to be passed. The act is to be passed before the end of this year. It has 35 provisions. First, it defines digital inclusion and the purpose of the law. It includes a framework for digital inclusion policy implementation, such as the Digital Inclusion Committee. And based upon the act, digital inclusion plan will be established every 3 years, based upon which detailed plans can be developed by government departments. And the law also includes digital training, basic training, and vocational training. And the law also includes elements on a survey to assess digital accessibility and a designation of digitally promising areas. And it also provides a basis for providing support for businesses in this area. And it also deals with digital standardization and talent fostering. And the act is to be passed before the end of this year. With the passage of the act, we need to establish a basic framework. My agency is working together with other departments to work on digital inclusion 2.0. So we'd like to share that plan with you when the plan is finalized at our next meeting. And everything is converging through digital these days. I hope that this workshop can be an opportunity for us to collaborate with other nations in order to promote digital inclusion, not only within Korea, but also across the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Min, for this comprehensive overview and practical examples of digital inclusion policies currently being implemented in Korea. What's particularly interesting is the institutional and multi-sectoral partnership structure that is behind these policies. Maybe we can hear more about this during the Q&A session later on. All right, next up, we have another country example from Bangladesh. So this time from Bangladesh. A2I, or Aspire to Innovate, is the flagship program of the Digital Bangladesh Agenda, which, among other things, promotes the financial inclusion of marginalized populations. Let us hear from Mr. Tourul Hassan, Digital Finance Service Specialist from the Ministry of ICT of Bangladesh, who coordinates A2I's digital financial services service initiatives. Let me give you the floor, Mr. Hassan.
Yeah, thank you. From Bangladesh, very good afternoon and good evening, dear panelists and the participants who joining today's session on exploring the opportunities and challenges of exemplary policies, initiatives on building an inclusive digital economy. So I am Mohammad Tourul Hassan, working as Digital Financial Services Specialist at Aspire to Innovate, popularly known as Bangladesh as A2I. So I'm working here as Digital Financial Service Initiatives. So let me first talk about a very brief about A2I, what we are doing, and later on I will focus on how we are working with government and how we are implementing different types of digital inclusion initiatives across society. So Aspire to Innovate program is a special initiative from Bangladesh government. So basically we are working with different ministries, divisions and government offices from ministries to field level to build their capacity, design new services, digital services, and implement these services at the field level. So previously we worked from Prime Minister's office, but now we are working from Cabinet Division and Ministry of ICT. Also, we have partnerships with local government divisions, and it is supported by Bangladesh government as well as different development partners like UNDP. So basically A2I works like an startup organizations. So we have 2,000 plus people from civil service, private sector and NGOs within our team. We have also 9,000 micro entrepreneurs all around the country who work at the field level to ensure services at citizens' doorsteps. We have 1,000 plus government innovations teams, and also we have 100 plus private partners. So our main scope is digital service development, policy reform, supply side capacity building, demand side awareness generation, and incentive for changes. So in Bangladesh, we have created a simplified tool to measure our impact. So how the digitization effort from governments are impacting the citizens at the rural level. So we simplified the indicator, and we developed a new set of indicators. We called it as TCV, like time, cost, and visit reduction. So any digital initiatives, so how it reduced the time and cost and visit for the citizens to get the services. So that's how we measured the impact of the digital transformation or digital initiatives of government. So till today, we have found that through the digitization effort, so we saved 1.9 billion days for citizens, 8.14 billion USD saved of citizens, and 1.004 billion visit of citizens, and cumulatively it is so 85% time saved, 63% cost saves, and 63% visit saves. So all of these So we reduce this time, cost, and visit for citizens to get the digital services from the government. And this is the simplest, simple indicator that we set for inter-government to measure their impact. So another, I think, milestone that we have introduced in our country to change the typical mindset of the brokers. So we basically change some languages that we are used to. So like e-governance, so we called it service at doorsteps. For business process re-engineering, I think we are familiar with these terms. So here in government, we introduced this as service process simplifications. Corruption and transparency, you know that it is very difficult to deal with the brokers and government peoples as well as others. Some words like corruption strategy. So this is, we transform it as TCV. So how time, cost, and visit we can reduce from the digitization effort. So how we are simplifying the language, traditional language within the government, and we are introducing a new like dimensions in the language, and how we are basically changing the mindset of the brokers to bring more innovations from the government and bringing service to the citizens' doorsteps. And the major impact that we have created is the key is that we have extensive partnership with government, private sector, and as well as South-South and triangular cooperation. So we have political visions, as I can say that Bangladesh governments, they declared the Digital Bangladesh Vision 2021 when and then now they declared also another vision, so Smart Bangladesh 2041. So we are politically aligned, and we are aligned our bureaucratic machinery within this vision. So it is a whole of government approach. So we have a strong public-private partnership, as I have already mentioned, that we have 100+ partnerships with different types of corporates, non-development organizations, universities. So there are different types of organizations that currently we are working with on. And also we have a South-South and triangular cooperations team, where we are working with different countries to share our experience with others, as well as to learn from other experiences also. So that creates basically a huge impact in our work in Bangladesh. So now talking on financial inclusion scenario in Bangladesh, the recent Findex data that published, the Findex 2021, where we have found we have 53% adults in our country, so who have a formal bank account in the financial systems. So we have 29% people, adult populations, who use mobile money account or mobile financial service account. And the current gender gap in financial inclusion is, so previously it was 29%, but in the recent report of Findex, we have found that it reduced to 20%. And 61% of our adult populations, they receive government payments through mobile phone. And during the pandemic, we have found that 10% account was first time open in the digital system to receive a OS payment or money from the government. Also, we have found in the Findex that currently 41% of our populations, they made digital payments for like utility and other types of digital transactions. And for male female, we are seeing that it is increasingly from 2017 to 2020-21. So the male and female, I think it is increasing day by day. And we are working on that, how we can minimize the gender gap in the financial inclusion sector. During the pandemic, so we have found that we have solved the key problems of government to reach the vulnerable communities through digital tools. So we have identified 3 challenges and 3 solutions that I want to share with you. The challenge 1 was how government can transfer emergency cash aid during the lockdown. during the COVID period. And almost at the end during the COVID time, so we have provided government cash assistance to 5 million beneficiaries or families all around the country. So the second challenge was how the social safety net benefits can be smoothly transferred to the beneficiaries, and the beneficiary number was almost 10 million plus. And the third challenge was how we can distribute wages to the 4 million garments worker, because during the pandemic, so everything was shut down. So how the wages of the garments worker can be ensured, and among these 4 million, most of them are women. So to solve this problem, so there are 4 key enabler factors that basically helps us to reach these vulnerable communities and reach them through digital means. Number one, a key factor was the private-public partnerships. Basically, government closely work with financial service provider, private sector financial service provider, like mobile financial service provider, fintechs, as well as different types of banks and non-banking financial institutions. So they basically closely work together to solve the problem and reach these vulnerable groups. The second was policy adoptions. So during the COVID time, so basically government adopted the digital payment strategy. So government declared that every single payments will be made digital. So that's how basically we bring the vulnerable groups in the digital environment through a policy adoptions. The third number was existing key infrastructures that we have. So you may know that in Bangladesh we have a biometrics enable digital NID for all citizens. So all of adult in our country, almost 99% plus, they have a national ID number with biometrics authentication systems. And also we have like 4G technology infrastructure, telecom infrastructure all around the country. So this infrastructure basically help us to reach this vulnerable community and bring them into the digital systems. And number 4 is the digital KYC. So basically our government allowed us to enable the vulnerable communities in the digital systems through a digital know your customer system. So as I mentioned already, so we have a digital NID system. So these beneficiaries of like 5 million household, 10 million social safety net beneficiaries, as well as the 4 million of garments worker, all of the beneficiaries, they use their national ID and mobile number to enroll in them in the digital banking system, and how they, and like within 4 weeks, like 1 month, we enroll all these beneficiaries groups in the digital systems and ensure their payments from government.
3 minutes left.
Okay. And for CMSME, we have found that in Bangladesh, there is a huge impact of CMSME in our economy, and it is generating a major part of our employment for Bangladesh. So we have found that there are 4 key obstacles. So they have problem with access to finance. They have absence of market linkage, lack of skills and capacity, and lack of identification and documentations for their businesses. So we have found there are key insights to frame the efforts to create an inclusive digital ecosystems. Number 1 is recognize when digital transactions are more convenient than cash, and vice versa. Appreciate and support the diversity of digital initiatives. Number 3 is double down on efforts to serve the women. Explore the needs of low-income clients who are actually design product based on the needs of the low-income groups. And embracing the challenges. As you know, there are several challenges to work with these vulnerable groups. So creating more awareness, increasing their literacy is important to introduce digital tools for these vulnerable groups. So from A to I, we are working with 4 key infrastructure and the digital financial inclusion system. So number 1 is how government can easily like transfer the social safety net program to the beneficiaries. So we have created a like national platform, NID based national platform, where we are using NID account number and mobile phone to transfer the government payments to the citizens. Second one is we have developed a national integration platform, bill integration platform. Basically, it is helping the fintechs and startups and private sector to provide payment services of its customers. So we have developed a national integrated platform, and through a one signal collection, any fintechs or its startups or financial service provider can easily avail all sorts of bill and fee payment services for their clients. Also, we are working with a national account aggregator. Through this aggregator platform, basically data will be easily shared with from banks to the other organizations. So customer will give their consent to share their data, and the data will be shared from his bank or mobile financial service or insurance or telcos to the fintechs, bank or credit rating agencies. So it will easily help the markets to design effective products and services for the clients as well as the small and micro enterprise, because as you know, so there are huge challenges to get the access of finances for the CMSMEs. So if we can establish this data sharing platform, so it will help easily access to shareable data, and it will help them easily access to the financial service, customized and integrated financial service for the individuals and CMSMEs. And to support the CMSMEs, so basically we are working in 5 areas. So number 1, so we are prioritizing the services. So how we can digital transformation and simplification of G2B services. So the services that is needed by micro and small enterprise. So we are prioritizing these services and we are digitizing these services. The second one is capacity and skills development. So how we can develop the capacity and skills of our micro and small enterprise so that they can improve their businesses and digitize their businesses. We are working on access to finance area. So digitize their accounting system, sharing building infrastructure for sharing data and ensuring that they are they can get easily access to the finance from financial institutions. We are also working on market action and digitization of supply chain systems so that they can easily market their product national and international level. And also we are establishing a one-stop shop for CMSME. So from a single point, so basically they will get all sorts of services which they need. So this is 5 key areas that we are that we have prioritized to ensure services for the cottage, micro and small enterprise. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hassan. I think A2I is an exemplary case of overcoming the challenges of digital access through innovation of financial products, which is something we will hear more about in the next session. And we can see also this virtuous cycle of an initiative that is driven by an ecosystem of public and private innovators, which in turn influences policy and regulatory reforms. All right, so now I would like to invite Mr. Jonathan Wong, who is Chief of Technology and Innovation at UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. He will give us a region-wide overview and share with us some of the broader policy applications and challenges and opportunities of digital transformation. Prior to joining ESCAP, Mr. Wong was Head of Innovation with the UK Department for International Development and has extensive experience in innovation technology, entrepreneurship, impact investing, and innovative financing. The floor is yours, Mr. Wong.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. So a warm welcome to everybody. My name is Jonathan Wong. I'm the Chief of Technology and Innovation at United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP. And today I just want to share with you some kind of the policy priorities for government or for an inclusive digital economy. I'll go into more detail around what I mean by this during the presentation. For those of you who don't know about ESCAP, we're kind of the Asia Pacific arm of the United Nations Secretariat. And our work on technology innovation covers kind of 3 core areas. 1, we act as a policy think tank. 2, we provide policy advice to governments. And then 3, we're a platform for intergovernmental cooperation. So in that regard, my presentation today will really focus on what governments can do and what we have supported governments to implement so that they can direct digital technology for more inclusive outcomes or more inclusive digital economies. And we focus on two core agendas. One is around inclusive digital technology innovation policies for the SDGs, and secondly, around policy frameworks to promote private sector innovation for the SDGs. And I'll talk more about that shortly. For the presentation today, I'll start by just giving some context, challenges and opportunities. I'll then talk about some of the digital policy priorities for an inclusive digital economy. And then I'll also talk about some non-digital policy priorities for an inclusive digital economy, which are equally as important as digital policies. And I will explain more as I go along. So I think it's a gross underestimate to say that we are living in unprecedented times. Of course, we've lived through now the COVID pandemic and are living through it. We have an energy and food crisis, and the climate emergency is still with us and is not going away. But I suppose a defining feature of the pandemic has been the accelerated digital transformation that has permeated every aspect of our lives. I mean, we've seen how governments have used digital technologies to implement social protection schemes at scale. As we've heard from our speaker from Bangladesh just now, governments provided e-health and e-education solutions, and businesses that have been digitally enabled and have had access to digital finance and e-commerce have fared much better than businesses that have not. However, one of the big issues with the digital transformation that has happened is that many have been left behind. Now, everybody on this call here today has access to the digital world. Unfortunately, for over 2 billion people in the Asia-Pacific region, they don't, which is quite a striking statistic. And it's very hard for any of us to imagine what life would be like if we didn't have access to the digital world. But sadly, this is a reality, as I mentioned, for over 2 billion people in the Asia-Pacific region. And indeed, ensuring that digital exclusion, if you like, doesn't happen is probably one of the greatest challenges we face moving forward, if we're not to add yet another facet of inequality to the deep inequalities that are emerging in the Asia-Pacific region at this moment in time. So in this context, of course, inclusion must be at the heart of government digital transformation policies and strategies. So what does this look like? Let me start by digital policy priorities for inclusive digital economies. And within ESCAP, we talk about five core foundations of inclusive digital economies and societies. We talk about digital connectivity, digital skills, digital ID, digital finance, and e-commerce. And just to give you some examples of what's going on in the broader Asia-Pacific region, in terms of in India, you're probably all aware of the Aadhaar platform there around digital ID, which is allowing the government to distribute social protection and social safety nets to the whole population. In China, they have very specific and very deliberate policies around supporting e-commerce in the very lowest income areas. In Thailand as well, listen, not everybody can afford Wi-Fi. They have free public Wi-Fi and hotspots there to allow the public, and particularly the very poorest people, to have access to the digital world. In Turkey, we've heard very much today about the gender digital divide. They have very specific programs, and one of them is called Connected Women, on increasing digital skills within the female population. And in Fiji as well, in their recent financial inclusion strategy, that there are very deliberate and very measurable objectives within that strategy around engaging women in the financial inclusion strategy and how digital technologies can be used as a tool to meet that objective. And indeed, at the more intergovernmental level, if you like, we're currently supporting the government of Indonesia during their G20 presidency on policy priorities that the G20 countries, Republic of Korea being one of the G20 countries, can put in place to increase meaningful participation of vulnerable groups in the digital economy. So it's really great to see this inclusive aspect of digital economy making its way into these intergovernmental platforms, ones as significant as the G20 as well, which we're currently supporting. Now, I want to talk about kind of some non-digital policy priorities for inclusive digital economies. And in my opinion, it's less important, sorry, how can I say this? The technology is less important than the intent and deployment of the technology. And of course, in the Asia Pacific region, we've heard from our speaker from Korea, fourth industrial revolution technologies such as AI have been driven by the private sector. There's very heavy investment in the private sector. And I think it's really important as a policy agenda, what can governments do to encourage the private sector to think about people as well as profit, and to move from business as usual to inclusive business. And certainly we've heard social enterprise mentioned several times today, inclusive businesses and impact investing emerging in the region as alternative business models to actually benefit people and planet and not just profit, and be more inclusive as well. In Bangladesh, just last week, we supported the government on their impact investing strategy and action plan, which was launched. And I think this is important because social enterprises and inclusive businesses need investment, and they need investment from investors who are looking to invest for impact as well as for profits. In Cambodia, we supported the government there on one of the world's first inclusive business strategies. Now, for those of you who don't know, an inclusive business is a business that targets the very poorest people to provide products and services to the base of the economic pyramid, which is going to be really important as a digital inclusion agenda. And in Thailand, and similarly in the Republic of Korea, there is a Social Enterprise Promotion Act and a Social Enterprise Act. And I really do believe we need the next generation of tech entrepreneurs to think about people as well as profit. So certain policies that encourage social entrepreneurship will be increasingly important, and we hope that we see more of these in the Asia Pacific region as well. Again, as a kind of intergovernmental level, a few years ago, the ASEAN member states and economic ministers signed up to the Inclusive Business Guidelines, the first region in the world to sign up to such a set of guidelines. So it's a real breakthrough for the region. We would hope that the broader Asia Pacific region also implements these guidelines as well. I'm very mindful of the time, so let me just kind of end with three key messages. I think the first message is really that digital technology can be a force for inclusion, but also for increasing inequality. And the 2 billion people in the Asia Pacific region without access to the digital world are testament to that. And I think that the point I raised earlier, we really need to nurture and support the next generation of tech entrepreneurs and companies to think about people alongside profit. And this is why enabling policies for social entrepreneurship and inclusive business are going to be really important for governments to implement in the coming years. And finally, government policy on these agendas must be very strategic and very deliberate in supporting those left behind. And I think a great example of that was our speaker from the Republic of Korea, who mentioned the Digital Inclusion Act. I think very specific inclusion and digital policies are needed if the promise of leave no one behind, which we have in the SDGs, is to be met. I'll stop there. Thank you very much and hand back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wong. On top of your message that inclusion must be at the heart of digital transformation policies and strategies, I think the need to direct the private sector towards inclusive and sustainable development is also well noted. And this is something we will talk a little bit more about in session 2. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's jump right into session 2, where we will switch gears slightly and hear more about concrete tools for financial inclusion and examples of private sector engagement. Let me first introduce Mr. Peter Morgan, Senior Consulting Economist and Advisor to the Dean from the Asian Development Bank Institute. Mr. Morgan has over 20 years of experience in the financial sector in Asia, including as Chief Asia Economist for HSBC. His research interests include financial inclusion, fintech, financial literacy, and financial education. Today, he will share with us the case of the Chinese digital yuan and the prospect of central bank digital currencies to contribute to financial inclusion. So Mr. Morgan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Park. And I'd like to thank the organizers, the UNESCAP and UNDP, for inviting me to this very topical and important conference. So let me share my screen. Do you all see the screen?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So this is joint work with my colleague, Elijah Fullerton. So here's the outline, give a brief introduction to CBDCs in general, and then talk about the ECNY in particular and its general context for financial inclusion in China, some of the risks, and then some of the broader opportunities, and then also the outlook for a CBDC and cross-border payments. So in general, CBDC is simply a digital currency, which is a liability of a central bank. Digital currency is a currency which basically has its only form as digital. That is, it's not directly related to any paper currency or something like that. Broadly, CBDCs can be divided into either retail, that is those which are intended to be held by the general public and firms, and these can either be account-based or token-based, and the distinction is not so important in this context, or they could be targeting financial institutions, i.e. being just aimed at the wholesale market. And in terms of financial inclusion, obviously, I think that the retail CBDC has much more potential. There are many different ways to implement CBDCs. Again, that's not necessarily so relevant here. There are quite a lot of motivations for implementing CBDCs. First is the falling use of cash, and certainly anybody who's traveled to China has noticed that cash is pretty scarce these days. It can improve financial inclusion and support digitalization, which is one of the key themes of this conference. It can increase efficiency, competition, and interoperability of the payment system. It could increase redundancy of the retail payment system if part of it were to break down for some reason. It does have a potential to have negative interest rates, although, as I mentioned, that probably is not going to be used. And a non-anonymous system could improve monitoring of transactions. In the case of China, the digital currency electronic payment, short as DCEP, or the ECNY, has been managed by the People's Bank of China since 2014 under a centralized system. It is a retail CBDC and it has legal tender status. The PBOC has been conducting quite a few pilot tests involving many major cities, 20 private companies, and also was used at the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. It's a coupled hybrid of digital currency and electronic payment. It's issued by the central bank, but operated and exchanged by authorized financial institutions. And this makes it a two-tier system. So the central bank does not directly interact with the public. Everything goes through the mediating financial institutions. And this will help avoid competition with existing financial institutions, which could otherwise lead to financial disintermediation and some risks to financial stability in the financial system. It is token-based and hence does not require a link to a bank account. And this makes it at least potentially accessible to foreigners as well as Chinese residents. And it supports managed anonymity with 4 different levels of KYC, or know your client. So for very small transactions, they can be done completely anonymously, but as the transaction size increases, there are higher requirements for a verification of the ID. Now, in terms of its implications for financial inclusion in China, I think the key point here is that financial inclusion is already pretty high there, even without the ECNY. So almost 90% of the population has a financial account. Over 80% of the population has already made a digital payment. And there's already a highly developed private payment space. It's dominated by 2 giants, Alipay and WeChat. The 2 systems are not interoperable, but pretty much everybody has an account in both, so it's not such a big problem. And they both created quite large and complex financial ecosystems around this payment space. Now, this has resulted in a huge concentration of transaction-related information in the hands of these 2 companies, and that's not necessarily welcomed by the authorities. So I think that's one of the incentives perhaps for the central bank to be involved in the payment system. So I think the basic situation in China is that the actual impact on financial inclusion is not likely to be that great, given the fact that financial inclusion is already relatively high. So that if you look at this chart, this shows the number of subscribers to WeChat and Alipay already, even as of 2018, covering most of the adult population, probably even higher at this point. And if we look at the share of adults who have a financial account, you can see that in the PRC, it's around 90% now, and that's increased by about 10% over the past 4 years. And similarly, also a very high ratio of adults have made or received a digital payment. So again, the private payment space is already quite well developed in China. Now, there are various risks associated with CBDCs. First, as I mentioned before, a CBDC that closely competes with bank deposits could lead to deposit outflows and thereby depress bank credit and output, while a cash-like CBDC could lead to the disappearance of cash. So the answer, as I mentioned before, to the first risk is adoption of a two-tier system. Also, it suggests that CBDCs should not be interest-bearing, so they won't compete with deposits. And as I mentioned, cash has already pretty much disappeared in the PRC anyway, so that's not a big problem at this stage. Certainly, CBDC could face increased exposure to cyber attacks. Disadvantaged groups, and this has been, I think, discussed previously, may find it harder to access and use CBDC, which reflects things like inadequate infrastructure, lack of digital financial literacy, and this could actually tend to lead to an increase in the digital divide if you don't have offsetting policies. And individuals with lower digital financial literacy could face risks of fraud, phishing, and hacking. Now, in terms of the broader context of financial inclusion, I think CBDC does have potential. It could increase access to payment systems in countries where the reach of private systems is more limited. It could increase the potential for direct government transfers, as we've heard in the case of Bangladesh, although that's not actually CBDC, but this could include social security payments to individuals and thereby increase efficiency and reduce the potential for waste and corruption. Such payment systems could also deliver financial education and a digital financial education potentially, and lower costs of remittances and e-commerce. And potential areas of opportunity would be to perhaps act as an intermediary for the distribution of CBDCs and to promote the development of e-commerce. Now, CBDC has, I think, a particularly interesting use case in the case of cross-border payments, because many Asian countries depend significantly on remittance income from overseas workers, but the cost of such remittances is still high, roughly 6% to 7%. And this is a barrier to financial inclusion, and also it's a barrier to e-commerce. Now, implementation of CBDCs does have the potential to significantly reduce these costs if they can be coordinated across countries. And a number of pilot projects are being conducted to study this issue, including the M-Bridge project, which includes the PBOC. However, such implementation still faces many hurdles, particularly since basically you would have to have multiple CBD systems that are compatible and would be able to interact efficiently. And this next diagram just shows a schematic of the M-Bridge project, which includes China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Abu Dhabi. So in conclusion, I think China's implementation of the ECNY represents one of the most advanced CBDC projects anywhere amongst major economies. It does have the potential to increase competition in the payment system, but the domestic use case is actually not that strong, given that there's already a well-developed and widespread domestic payment system and high level of financial inclusion. So I think the potential impact on financial inclusion may be greater in countries where the current degree of financial inclusion is lower, although even there, it's not clear that the CBDC has more potential to reach the underbanked than possible other options, which would not be liabilities of the central bank. So I think, ironically, the most attractive use case for CBDCs is for cross-border payments, where there appears to be significant potential to reduce costs in the areas of remittances and e-commerce. But as I mentioned, this requires implementation of CBDCs in multiple countries and difficult tasks of coordination. So let me stop there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan, for this overview of your research paper. It's clear that in spite of the many risks that are attached to the use of central bank digital currencies, there is still potential for this tool to contribute to achieving financial inclusion. Now I would like to introduce our next panelist, Ms. Yoon-Yeo Yi from the Korean venture capital called TheVentures. From an impact investor's point of view, she will describe the use of innovation to promote the growth of social entrepreneurs, who in turn tackle global challenges through tech for inclusion. So Ms. Yi, over to you.
Thank you very much. First, I'm going to share the screen. Hi, I'm Yoon-Yeo Lee, a partner at TheVentures, Seoul-based venture capital investing in early-stage startups in Asia since 2015, and also a founding partner of Impact Collective, an impact investing initiative co-created by TheVentures and public and private partners in impact startup ecosystem, including UN partners here. I'm very happy to share how Impact Collective invents the new way to invest in inclusive impact generating startups by leveraging Web3 innovations, especially the DAO model for cross-sectoral collaborations and collective support. So this is a brief of who we are. So we are the Asia's first and the largest community-driven investment program accelerating early-stage impact startups in the region. Why we started from Asia is that Asia is the most affected region of the global challenges. The fast growth of their local impact startups, but innovative solutions is the key to resolve the challenges and regenerate the values. So what we've done so far is building a community of local and international players in impact startups ecosystem. So it includes public, private, and supporters and the builders. So we have 2 annual acceleration programs applied by over 800 startups from over 39 nations. And also we deployed equity investments in over 20 different startups with $5 million dedicated fund. So far, we've learned that impact startups have higher demands on the cross-sectoral partnerships and comprehensive supports, both from the local and international, and investors of impact startups have different expectations. So they have a lot of different, return strategies, or they have different proposals to invest in. The acceleration and investment should be much diversified to cater both the needs from entrepreneurs and investors. So the key of Impact Collective is the very collective nature of the program. The community is at the core of its inclusive investment process, from application phase to nomination and final selection phase of the portfolios for the Impact Collective Fund. To make sure all the voices are heard from the community, including community judge, expert group, and the investment committee, Impact Collective implements a community voting process using voting tokens and the incentive mechanism using thanks tokens. The aim of our community-driven approach is to achieve significantly enhanced diversity in the decision-making landscape for sourcing inclusive solutions with greater financial performances, as well as scale positive impact for our communities and the planet. Through Impact Collective, for the last 2 years, we could meet over 800 startups from over 39 countries in the Asia Pacific region. Thanks to its collective supporting system within the 2 cohorts, over 120 startups got accelerated by and connected with public and private sector partners of the respective local ecosystem. That includes over 200 of leaders as experts in Impact Collective. Well, Impact Collective is actually evolving. I mean, it keeps evolving as it continues innovations to scale the impact through inclusive investing. For the last 2 years, our community successfully launched and executed the POC, the proof of concept, of the simplest model of single fund sourced in DAO-like community-driven due diligence system. From later this year, we will get into phase 2 experiments to scale through DAO, embracing the multi-fund model governed by DAOs. The Impact Collective itself, with initial contributors and partners as a co-created organization, will be set as DAO to sustainably continue its activities and influences. And ultimately, it will grow further by linking multi-layered special purpose DAOs for different purposes of impact investing. As a fully functioning DAO, Impact Collective will ensure its maximum operativity and act as a regulated, trusted platform to serve the collectives of investment DAOs. We believe the collective efforts by contributors as individuals and professionals, DAO members as investors and entrepreneurs, an extended council board of fund partners and tech enterprises, public partners, and various entrepreneur supporting organizations will enhance the inclusive economy more dramatically and enable sustainable inclusion and diversity. The collective community as DAO with diverse representations allows for the identification and validation of opportunities that would otherwise be missed. Impact Collective is not just about the financial influences. The whole journey in Impact Collective DAO community actually covers the full life cycle of startup growth. We identify impact startups in diversified lenses. We build trust in the community and collectively learn important skills and innovations to grow further. And we keep growing together with the like-minded through partnerships and peer support. And finally, we invest in the startups doing good and doing well at the same time as a collective of investors. Impact Collective's capital model is based on democratic capital allocation. that is centered on collective deal sourcing, market intelligence, and blockchain-powered DAO system, facilitating group decision-making and knowledge exchange and autonomous collective investment. And diversity actually matters. The decentralized funds collected and operated by community members of interest will give a lot of like inclusive model of the startup investment. This radical investment model relies on the wisdom of the crowd to democratize capital allocation with a platform that enables transparency around voting and feedback for startups. So to support thousands of impact startups generating billions of impact in Asia and the beyond, Impact Collective DAO as a real innovations and co-created initiative will keep its excellence and continue the influence of the market with this new model of capital play. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yi. This unique community-driven approach and the DAO structure of the Impact Collective program is a great example for investors and other private sector actors out there who seek to support startup businesses to achieve their full potential and create impact. So thank you very much. Now I would like to introduce our final panelist, Mr. Nofi Bayu Dharmawan, who's founder and CEO of Commerce, which is an alumnus actually of the Youth Collab and Impact Collective Acceleration Program, and which contributes to the inclusion of rural youth by connecting them with MSMEs in the e-commerce sector in Indonesia. Prior to founding Commerce, Mr. Dharmawan was a civil servant working with the Financial Education and Training Agency of the Indonesian Ministry of Finance. So Mr. Dharmawan, over to you.
I will share the screen. Thanks for your time. Let me to introduce myself. My name is Bayu from Indonesia. So I'm the founder and CEO of Commerce. So basically, we aim to transform the lives of rural Indonesian communities by unlocking e-commerce potential. Me as a founder, I will share about how important inclusivity in digital economics, especially for growing job opportunity in youth landscape in Indonesia. So we start with the problem. There are a lot of village youth. I will tell you the story. This is the story of Riani, one of the village youth in our district in Purbalingga. So Riani very have a problem with she very difficult to find a job in the village. On the other hand, there is Mr. Aziz. The SM is from East Java, and all of business activity handled by itself. Mr. Aziz handling their customers, their packaging, their advertising, and etc. So not only Riani and Mr. Aziz, but also a million of youths and SMEs in Indonesia facing the same problem also. A lot of village youth in Indonesia migrate to the big city because of in a village lack of jobs, especially for digital skills. And there is a huge opportunity. SMEs in Indonesia, only 13% of them have penetrated in the e-commerce, and they willing to hire another capable people to help and optimize their business, so that we create Commerce. So basically, Commerce connect between SMEs and village youth through our platform. So our platform enable the village youth and SMEs to connect and hire the village youth. So with our platform, the SMEs can hire village youth remotely, and with our platform, village youth gaining monthly income, gaining e-commerce skill, because we train the village youth until the village youth graduate from our training, and then the village youth keep staying in the village because we use remote working, so that we decrease with this digital inclusivity to keep the village youth in their village and then we decrease the rate of urbanization, and then we move economic values from the big city to the village, because the SM is paying monthly income to the village youth, and the majority of SM is coming from a big city, because in a big city the SM is facing the big problem with the standard of the salaries in there. So with this collaboration also, SMEs didn't need to prepare any office building, and then the salary also the SMEs pay with affordable rate, because the youth coming from the local or rural, and then we adjust the income or the salary that must paid by SMEs monthly. So we also have an app so that the SMEs can monitor the performance and the attendance of the youth. And then with these apps also, we have some like education or challenges to train the village youth about digital inclusivity, especially for rural. This is very, very facing the challenge to us to educate a lot of rural youth in Indonesia. And then this is our process in commerce. So basically, the youth in rural will register both online and offline. Majority of them register to us by offline, and then we interview and screening, and then we do training with the various of durations, depend on the difficult of the skills that they will mastering and in their skill. And then after the youth graduated from the training, the data will go into the talent pool, and then after the data will go into the talent pool, the SMEs allow to hire the youth, and then in the next early of month, the SMEs will pay the monthly admin fee to commerce, and then the salary to the youth that they hire. So this is the story of Mr. Aziz. He joined more than 2 years, and he empower around 5 talent or women youths in rural area in here, and the satisfaction rate is also good. The talent successfully closing thousands of sales in a month. And this is our activity. So basically, we have been trained more than 1,000 youths across Indonesian rural youths in Indonesia, and currently we disperse more than $80K per month to the rural youths across Indonesia, and a lot of alumni they starting their journey from like our partners into the independent young entrepreneur that leveraging or utilizing the skills that learned from commerce to become independent digital entrepreneur, to sell their product or to building their own business. So this is our ecosystem to improve our business through digital inclusion, especially for me as a founder. Thank you very much for the stakeholder that support us, like UNDP, like Youth Collab, like Impact Collective. But we're starting with the incubation. So basically, it's very suitable for young founders or the startup founders or the sociopreneur founders around Asia Pacific, that they strongly recommend to join like a Youth Collab incubation. They can join Youth Collab across each of country. And then I'm the alumni from the Youth Collab Indonesia 2 years ago, and a lot of like knowledge and then networking, and I also joined the Youth Collab Summit in Singapore in a couple of weeks ago. And then in terms of after incubation, the startups founder will face the product market fit. In Indonesia, there are study cases like Ministry of Information. They built programs to accelerate the product market fit for startup founders, especially with this digital inclusion support from the ministry. It's accelerate like us as startup founders to achieve the product market fit. And then we also eventually even got a lot of opportunity from UNDP Asia Pacific that still info the opportunity through like emails, through like a platform to support our startups. And then in Asia Pacific also there are TDN Asia that focus on mentorship, especially for social enterprise founders. It can strengthen the digital inclusion support, especially for founders in Asia Pacific that they need about support. And then about the financing, there is AVBN, Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, that they connect between philanthropic across Asia into startup founders like us through the grant program, through matchmaking with philanthropists and etc. In terms of investment readiness, I joined Impact Collective, and then in local, I joined Indigo Acceleration Program. This program conducted by the Telkom. Telkom is a government-owned telco company in Indonesia, but they invest and accelerate the investment readiness of startup founders, especially for us, like us, so many challenges to become startup founders, especially in rural area, and it's very helpful the joining like Impact Collective and Indigo Acceleration program without any limitation like location and etc. Last but not least, we also have Hub ID. It's created by the government, especially for Ministry Information, to matchmaking with the investor. So it's very suitable, especially for founder that achieve investment readiness to connect with the investor that will grow together and scale their impact. In terms of policies improvement, maybe as a founders, we need like founders friendly financing. You know that to facing the investment readiness, a lot of consideration, right, from the like venture capital and etc. We must straightforward like multiple due diligence and etc. Maybe UNDP can concern about the financing that very founders friendly, like in terms of duration or expectation into the exit duration of the investor and etc. It's just like an example. And then a lot of support system in Asia Pacific, and then I think this is a very important role for UNDP to like connecting the dots between one ecosystem to another ecosystem. This is my perspective, because in Asia Pacific, lots of programs by private sector, by government, by like Southeast Asia, and then Asia Pacific and etc. So many ecosystem builder, but there is no like a seamless integration between each other. Maybe in my opinion, if the ecosystem builder integrate one and another, it will strengthen the ecosystem of digital inclusivity, especially for startup founders. Yeah, maybe that's it from us. We hope we can scale a more bigger impact with digital inclusivity, especially for startup founders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darmawan. Thank you for sharing your experience as an entrepreneur yourself and provider of innovative solutions for digital inclusion. Commerce, I think, is a great example of how a multi-sectoral support system for entrepreneurs can help reach the poorest and excluded populations. So thank you for that. All right, so this concludes our series of presentations, and I'm sure our participants have taken good note of many inspiring ideas and lessons for application in each of our unique contexts. So now I would like to quickly proceed to the Q&A session because I have seen several interesting questions coming in. And as I mentioned before, we also collected questions in advance via pre-registration. We unfortunately can't address all of them in the remaining half hour or so that we have, but there are a few recurring ones which I would like to direct to each of our speakers. So first, let me direct two questions to Mr. Min from Korea's National Information Agency, because several questions were focused on the example of the Republic of Korea. So here are the two questions for you, Mr. Min. The first one is the following. Several of NIA's initiatives rely on the government's partnership with the private sector, which is exemplary. How are these public-private partnerships initiated in the first place and then implemented? Could you illustrate with one or two examples of companies that NIA collaborates with? So that's the first question. The second question, this one also came to us many times in different forms. So what kind of support does the Republic of Korea provide to bridge the digital gender gap? Could you also share one or two key examples from your agency or the Korean government overall? Over to you, Mr. Min.
우선 그 민간
Thank you for the questions regarding PPP. As I mentioned in my presentation, in order to pursue a successful digital inclusion policy, we need to use a PPP. Digital inclusion plan includes the set of governance and a council governing PPP pursuant to the plan from 2020. Digital capability, digital accessibility, and digital inclusion enterprise, and two other subcommittees, including 100 plus experts, have been operating as a digital inclusion forum. The digital inclusion forum deals with the development of digital inclusion policy. The forum provides feedback on improving laws and regulations gathered from the private sector. It also provides advice to the government. The forum meets every 2 months for a discussion, and toward the end of each year, the forum discusses various activities. The Digital Inclusion Forum, in order to expand a PPP, June is the month of information and culture in Korea. In June, we are identifying private sector partners who can collaborate with us. So we hold various ceremonies such as digital inclusion declaration, and the forum identifies and awards private sector partners who are providing exemplary services in digital inclusion. And as for the next question on how to reduce a gender digital divide, in Korea, women, due to marriage and child rearing, sometimes have to stop their studies or career. In the area of digital, women equipped with a digital capability can be limited from participating in a digital economy. We at NIA like to encourage these women whose career has been disconnected, who can be targeted in our training that can help them find jobs. Through our annual digital software training, we are providing vocational training to 120 women each year. Through such a training program, women software experts and data analysts can be fostered. And 80% of female participants who completed the program have been able to gain a job. Based upon the know-how of the program, we are utilizing our Digital Competency Center program to continue to expand and scale digital training programs targeting women.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Min. I take a personal interest in this software Wonder Woman program, so maybe on a different occasion we will have the opportunity to hear more about it. Now, allow me to ask the same question about addressing the gender gap in the Bangladesh context this time, because again, this issue has come up several times in various forms in our survey. Mr. Hassan, you mentioned in your presentation the importance of doubling down efforts to serve women specifically. What kind of support does Bangladesh provide to bridge the digital gender gap? Can you share an example or two?
Yeah, thank you. So when it is a question of limited digital access and infrastructure for digital gender gap, so when we started the Digital Bangladesh journey in 2010, we established one-stop service point, like 5,000 plus one-stop service point at rural level. And the one-stop service point was is hosted at the Union Porishad building. So Union Porishad is the lowest tier of local government institution. So basically the Union Porishad building is situated at the village level. So we established one-stop service point at this building, and the point is run by two entrepreneurs. One is male and one is female. So basically our vision is to establish a digitally enabled centers where the rural people, especially the women who don't have the access or the capacity in the digital means, so that they can visit those shared infrastructure and get their services. And from the beginning, we ensured that one male and one female entrepreneurs run the service, so that the women in the rural level who want to get digital services, they can visit those centers and get services from the women entrepreneurs. And recently we have another initiatives. We are establishing women agent networks all around the country at the union level, the lowest administration level, so that the women agent can provide focused service to the rural women. So as we know from different researches that women have preferences to get services from women agent. So we are trying to establish a women agent network to ensure that the services to the rural women can be ensured. And also for different programs like different types of government disbursement. By policy and design, we ensure that the rural women can get access to the digital account and they can get their benefits in the digital system.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hassan, for these community level, concrete examples of your efforts to address this gender gap issue, which was raised by several of our participants. All right, so now we have heard throughout today several speakers talk about the importance of digital access and skills building. So in this context, let me ask Mr. Wang from UNESCAP the following question. Can you share some key programs, either ones that are UN-backed or otherwise, that support digital transformation, especially in countries with limited digital infrastructure? In other words, how can we ensure the digital inclusion of those with limited digital access and skills in the first place?
Sure. Firstly, it's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. But I would go back to what I said during my presentation, that in terms of government policy, it has to be very, very deliberate and very, very strategic. And again, I think a good example is the digital inclusion policy work going on in Korea at this moment in time. It specifically targets, and as our colleague from Bangladesh mentioned as well, specifically targeting women within the digital inclusion programs, which is really important because, how can I say this? Enabling women's economic empowerment in Asia could add as much as 12% of GDP by 2025. And it's a dividend that not many countries can afford to pass by. So I think it's going to be an incredibly important agenda. In terms of specific initiatives, again, much of my work is around integrating inclusive aspects within digital policies. So we've done that in Indonesia and Mongolia. And what I mean by that is, again, having very deliberate targets around inclusion of the very poorest women and engaging them in that process. On other specific initiatives, we actually have an Asia Pacific Center for ICT training in Incheon, in Korea. who provide kind of digital skills training specifically to policymakers looking to develop digital policies, and of course to women entrepreneurs as well. And gender has been brought up several times today, so I kind of focus on this point. We also have a rather large program around catalyzing women's entrepreneurship, and just linking the first session to the second session. We've worked very closely with tech startups around digital finance. Now, to give an example, we and UNCDF developed a FinTech Women's Innovation Fund, which invested in startups that were looking to develop solutions for access to finance to women entrepreneurs. And to give a very concrete example, in Cambodia, a big problem with women entrepreneurs accessing finance from banks is that they don't have financial records or any digital literacy. So when the bank asks for financial records for their business, they just don't have them. So we developed what I call a very cool app on a very uncool topic, which was accounting. And this was a very simple app that allowed women to say, okay, here's what I'm spending through my business and here's what I'm putting in. And the app automatically generated the financial reports that they needed to actually go to banks to unlock finance. So I think that's a really good example on your point around an LDC where they may lack digital skills. You know, we made an app and a piece of technology that made it so you didn't need digital skills. It was so simple to use. And I think that's the key to making the technology accessible, is that how can you make them accessible to those who have no digital literacy or may not even be able to read? And I think it's difficult, but certainly with examples like that, it is possible. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong, for these very concrete examples from the various countries, and also for introducing us to UNESCAP, which is indeed based here in Korea, and they do very important work for capacity building. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Now let me turn to Mr. Morgan, and I'm going to ask the same question because it has come up multiple times. And then another one, if I may, which we collected via the pre-survey. So two questions for you. So the first one is, how can we ensure, in your view, the digital inclusion of those with limited digital access and infrastructure, especially in the context of developing countries or least developed countries? So that's the first question. And the second question, if I may, in addition to the central bank digital currencies that you introduced today, could you share with us the opportunities and risks that are attached to other innovative solutions for financial inclusion, such as fintech, because we know this is another area of your expertise, and I realize it's another whole new paper, but if you could just briefly comment on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, first, on the issue of digital inclusion, I think it's very difficult to have digital inclusion if you don't have the basic infrastructure. So you need internet connectivity, particularly in rural areas. I think that in many cases it's going to translate into smartphone or at least feature phone connectivity. So those are the very basic requirements. Now, there are also issues in terms of having an ID, because in many cases, to get a smartphone, you need to have an ID. So that's part of the perhaps more basic underlying infrastructure. That's the first step to actually getting a phone, much less using it. Now, the other aspect is how do you improve digital literacy, digital financial literacy in particular? That is, it doesn't help. People may actually get into trouble if they're trying to use some of these digital tools if they don't have adequate information about the risks of using them and what the possible modes of redress might be if you do get into trouble. So that you also need infrastructure in terms of both digital literacy, digital financial literacy, and also you need a consumer protection infrastructure so that that will help individuals to build trust in their system. So that it's, I think it does require sort of multiple approaches to make people, particularly disadvantaged people, feel comfortable using digital technology. In terms of the second question, I think there are four main areas of financial technology. First is payments. Secondly would be fundraising, either lending or let's say equity type fundraising, such as crowdfunding. Thirdly would be investment, such as robo-advisors, that kind of thing. And fourthly would be kind of more miscellaneous, which would include things like fintech insurance policies. Now, I think for the lower income persons, the first two are going to be the most made use of. So first is payments, and I think there the major risks are, again, those of possible identity theft, password theft, phishing, various kinds of fraudulent messages that people get. I've heard a statistic that fraudulent messages have actually increased significantly during the COVID period, so that even though fintech use has increased, so has fraud-related fintech messages. Now, in terms of fundraising, perhaps the biggest risk, ironically, is overborrowing. So that if people aren't well informed about the actual interest rates that they're paying, the fees that they're paying, then they may well get into trouble by borrowing too much, and then they get into this vicious circle of compounding interest. So I think that's where consumer protection comes in. That you have to have a well-established framework for consumer protection, for regulation of lenders, perhaps caps on interest rates, that kind of thing. So again, you need that kind of infrastructure in place.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morgan, for providing a very nutshell answer to a big question. I realized that it was a big question, and also thank you for emphasizing this importance of promoting upskilling, especially in the developing country context. And this, I think, takes us nicely into the next question, which is directed at our private sector participants who are directly engaged in this kind of work. So let me direct this next question to Ms. Yi from TheVentures. Could you share your experience of financing youth-led or women-led entrepreneurs who use technology to promote inclusion? As an investor yourself, what is your most important consideration when reviewing digital tech enterprises engaged in promoting social inclusion? Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, the one story that really interesting story that I can share is the investment case of the Pakistan-based female-led impact startup Sehat Kahini. So Sehat Kahani is co-founded by two female doctors, Dr. Sarah Saeed and Dr. Ifat Jafar, and they operate a telemedical service made up of an all-female healthcare provider network and e-health clinics in Pakistan. They're to serve the prevailing supply-demand gap in the national healthcare ecosystem, with the aim of serving access to healthcare in underserved communities and females. So Pakistan is actually the 5th largest population country in the world, over 220 million, but half of which do not actually see a doctor in their lifetime. The majority of those, that lack access to healthcare practitioners are from low-income backgrounds, particularly women and children. Surprisingly and ironically, however, 63% of the, over 200,000 registered doctors in the country are women, but due to social stigmas tied to pursuing careers in family caregiving, around 85,000 female doctors currently do not work. Through Impact Collective, the startup actually closed pre-series A round successfully, raising $1 million in total. And now the company provides sustainable digital jobs for over 5,000 female medical doctors. And they run 36 e-clinics nationwide and serves employees and family members of over 350 enterprises as well. So during the last 2 years, they made a huge growth, like 8x user expansion and 10x revenue jump. And that led the successful follow-up round of the Series A recently as well. So, as this story tells you, this diversified investment lenses through the community-driven decision-making actually, captures a lot of opportunities deeply underlined and tied with this inclusivity and diversity, area. Well, as an investor for the second question, when we review the digital tech enterprises engaged in promoting social inclusion, our key factor or key consideration is profit impact alignment. So as this is an investment decision making, we cannot ignore the financial performances. But we're not only focusing on the financial activities, but we deeply, analyze how their impact generation model tied up with their core business model. So that is the, impact profit alignment that we have the priority of the consideration. And then the second part would be the scalability. So how innovative the solution is and how scalable, the digital mechanism and system works. So in that way, we can create the maximum positive impact through one single investment activities at a time. So that is all, and that's why we believe that through the inclusive model of investment, more inclusive economy will be fostered.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yi. So impact, profit alignment, and scalability. I hope some of the startups who are joining today have heard this message and refer to it when they apply for the next round of the Impact Collective acceleration program. So thank you very much. All right, so I will raise one final question, and you can guess that this one is directed at Mr. Dharmawan, and you touched on this a little bit in your presentation before, but here it is. So being a young entrepreneur yourself, what are some key challenges hindering the youth from having an equal opportunity in the digital economy? What kind of support from the government and other sector partners do you think is further needed to tackle this issue? Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Park. So I think, in my opinion, especially for in my district, I go into each district in Indonesia in rural youth, and then I found challenges, a lot of ministry, especially like in Indonesia, and I think it's quite similar with another country in Southeast Asia. The first challenges is information or like access, because so many programs conducted by Ministry of Information, Ministry of Startups, Ministry of Cooperation or SMEs, and etc. And then so many programs by public-private sector like a UNDP, in Southeast Asia, like YZili, and a lot of CSR program that I joined also, like a DBS Foundation, and very a lot of information. But the bottom line is in local or in a district, maybe I think public-private sector must have integrated information so that when the youth seeking for the opportunity or seeking for the digital inclusions of opportunity, they can access all of information, the all of ministry and all of public sector that they can get that information or that access are maybe the key player in a district, like in my district, namely like Dinas Pemuda dan Olahraga. It's like local government that that have responsibility for the young people or for youth. The responsibility is they must forwarding the information or the access that they got from the ecosystem builder in Southeast Asia or Asia Pacific or maybe like in my country in Indonesia. So the solution, in my opinion, is like number one, there must be the creation of information or access by public private sector, and then the second one is like deep dive on a grassroots to the youth about forwarding information from the ecosystem builder. Maybe it's my opinion. Thank you, Mrs. Park.
Thank you, Mr. Darwan, for this live testimony from somebody who has been both a youth entrepreneur and a government civil servant. And I hope your point about, streamlining information, this kind of dialogue that we're having today that brings together both public and private sector will contribute to that kind of streamlining. So thank you very much to Mr. Darmawan and to all of our speakers and to all the participants today for your active participation. I'm afraid the 2 hours are nearly up and we need to wrap up the dialogue now. I sincerely hope that today's regional policy dialogue has contributed to our collective thinking about building a more inclusive digital economy that leaves no one behind. And one participant asked in the chat box earlier today about inclusive process of policy discussion at community, regional, and national level. And I hope that this kind of event contributed to doing just that. So thank you very much once again, and I hope to cross paths again with all of you as we take this work forward. Thank you and goodbye for now. 참여해주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. We'll be in touch again.